Unloose the goose. We'll take no views. Your paradigm's run out of time and we've got no use. Unloose the goose.
Well, good morning, folks, and welcome to the reunion episode of Unloose the Goose. I've got the Gaggle in the green room right now. We're going to bring them on one at a time and then talk about whatever we talk about. If you want to get a question in, please put the word question in all caps so that we can mark it and build it into the discussion, as well as make sure you let folks know we are live because we haven't been live in a while and maybe people aren't checking their Unloose the Goose feeds. I don't know, but I'm going to start by bringing CJ Killmer in from the Dangerous History podcast. CJ, how's the goosing been going in your area?
The goosing has been wild. We've had 2 hurricanes in the last month clobber various parts of my state. So it's been a busy month.
Plus, I understand you've been goosed a lot in the last year or so, right?
It's been a tough time. Yeah, been a lot of personal SHTFs one after the other for several years now. So yeah, I'm worn out.
CJ's been proving that you can just be stubborn and get through some shit. That's what CJ does now. Okay, we got John Bush from LiveFree.Academy. John, what's new in your neck of the woods?
Well, we're making some pretty good progress on our homestead. Got a new community member, dug out a giant pond, and just been breaking our backs, getting it full of clay. Food production's going good. More ducks and chickens, and trying to balance out. Because remember, I was always all 10x and stuff. I think maybe there were too many, maybe 100x is a little too much. So we're pulling back to try to balance things out to have a higher quality of life, because we should never lose sight of quality of life.
You know, that's been a theme I've been hearing from a lot of content creators in the last 6 weeks or so, which is interesting that you're right there on that wavelength. Okay, we got Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast. Jack, what's happening in a couple weeks at your place?
We're having TSP 24. We'll have about 80 crazy people joining me on my property. We'll be eating good food, having a lot of good fellowship, and we are going to be teaching people a lot of really cool stuff. This year, we're kind of having a day that is focused on soils and the typical homesteading stuff. We're having a day, it's more like a lifestyle day. There's going to be a lot on cooking and food preparation and things like that. We're going to have a day, as usual, that kind of focuses more on like entrepreneurship and health and things like that. So it's going to be a really good, diverse workshop, and it's going to be fun. And as usual, when we opened up the gates and let the tickets loose, we sold out, I think, this year in 4 minutes.
Wow.
It's pretty badass to sell. We sell 50 paid tickets at $600 a piece, and we sold them out in 4 minutes. It's kind of humbling that we can still do that, honestly.
Well, that's proof people still do want to get together in private or in person. I've been hearing a lot of event managers say that this year people don't want to go to events anymore. And then Jack sells his out in 4 minutes anyway. So maybe there's something else wrong, my friends. Maybe there's something else wrong if you're not selling tickets. Well, I'm Nicole Sauce from Living Free in Tennessee. And since our last episode, I've shifted focus for the same reason John's talking about, where I was running 3 things at one time and not putting enough attention on the things that really matter in my life. And like the whole purpose of doing this is to be able to do the things that matter in your life. So Holler Roast, you'll notice, has gotten a big facelift in the last few weeks. And I realized that I do love coffee. So why not keep pushing the coffee and the podcast and make time for a swim spa? But we'll talk about all those things later. Okay. We sent out some notes in advance, and Jack, I think you brought up the first news article,
Okay.
which is the U.S.
I don't remember what it was. So
U.S. banks now face $515 billion in unrealized losses.
Yeah.
What do we think that's going to do?
I think it's a problem because it was about 5% of that when we had the great crisis of 08-09.
Wow.
So this is 95 times worse, I guess you would say, 100 times worse, roughly. Now, there is a stickler there, but it also shows how stupid we are in the first place. The 08-09 crisis wasn't caused by the unrealized losses. It was caused by an accounting procedure called mark-to-market. which basically said that at any point to balance their books, the banks had to say, if we sold this shit now, what would we get? And do you have sufficient reserves under the current policy? So, of course, both of those things are gone now. They have infinite lending capability with no reserve requirement, and they got rid of mark-to-market accounting. That was because, the banks know how to manage things. Well, it's never, ever, ever been this bad. And what I mean by never been this bad, I don't mean the number, because the number obviously go up because inflation, right? What I mean is as a percentage of every other economic metric. Like, so if you do it, like we would do a study on a population per capita, if you take that approach, it's never been close to this bad. Basically, all the banks are bankrupt, which means the Federal Reserve is bankrupt, which means the United States government is bankrupt, which of course we all know that. But when you start having indicators like this come out, you get to a point where like all of the normal people, if you want to call them that, the normies, go, oh shit, the banks are bankrupt, the government's bankrupt, the Federal Reserve is bankrupt. So it's when the people that normally wouldn't know start to know that then the response is the problem more than the problem itself. And I think we're getting really close to that. And makes me wonder, like we're talking about the lead up to the election. Uncle Ted, most of you know who I mean when I say Uncle Ted, he wrote a really long letter to people about why he was doing horrible things. And while he was doing horrible things, the things in the letter or manifesto, if you want to call it that, weren't necessarily wrong. Dude had like 169 IQ or some shit. And one of the things he said in there is when everything's about to go to shit politically, you do not want your side in power. And I'm just wondering if maybe like the ultimate football fumble ever is being committed on purpose. Because like some shit, no matter who wins, shit is going down in the next 4 years. It's going to be hardcore economically.
What does the historian think about that? That's you, CJ.
Yeah, sorry.
He doesn't want to say.
Not good.
It's not good. I mean, it's not surprising in light of, I think what's driving a lot of this is just the effects of the inflation that everybody else, and I know this from firsthand experience, as does pretty much everybody who doesn't, live Ted Kaczynski style out in the middle of nowhere, that everything costs more. And so, every single American family that was like scraping by, okay, let's say up through 2019, all right, but then, everything since 2019 has just been one thing after another piled up on top of the camel's back that is the American middle and working class. And a lot of us, myself included, are really struggling right now just to pay our basic bills and make ends meet. And so then that flows uphill to the banks because then, all the easy money they loaned us over the years, now we're having a hard time paying under the current inflationary conditions, even working multiple jobs and all kinds of stuff like that.
John, when you hear that, are you worried about it affecting your life, or are you like, I've built so much separately, none of this matters?
No, I wish I could say that. That's the ultimate end goal. I don't want to bullshit anybody. Life is hard. It's getting, I'm not saying life is hard, but it's definitely harder to make ends meet, even if you've set up a level of independence, which only underscores the need to become as absolutely independent as possible. And to echo on Jack's little double agent chicanery play there, I think that's something we always need to be wary of. And when it comes to Bitcoin, for example, early on we were involved in Bitcoin and we're like, Bitcoin's going to end the Fed and it's going to completely disrupt and upend everything. And there is a whole lot of disruption, don't get me wrong, but the Fed the central banks are so damn cunning. They're like, let's see how we can kind of leverage this and let's roll out our own digital currency, a central bank digital currency. Just the same. People see Trump coming out and they're like, we got this maverick outsider against the deep state. During his first presidency, obviously, he selected a cabinet that was full of swamp creatures. And now this time around, he has mass support. And I think that this whole predator class, New World Order, whatever you want to call them, they're most definitely playing both sides against each other. And the Bilderberg group and the technocrats and most definitely the old Israel has their they've basically bought and paid for both candidates. So I think it's just really important to underscore the need to extract ourselves from all of that, and maybe the need to accelerate all that. We've been banging on this ever since the beginning of the show. And it's not that difficult to see, but you guys are right. Whenever the mainstream public starts to see it, that's when the panic begins. So just rally with your freedom community, exit the economy to the best of your ability. And I know it's challenging for people that are well established and mortgages and IRAs and 401ks, but just try to do what you can in order to make sure that you can at least maintain some standard of living or quality of life if this whole, or when this whole thing falls out underneath us.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a question here. If the average American pre-CUFIS didn't have 500 to 1,000 for an emergency, what are they doing today? Just living off credit cards to buy essentials?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's another stat there. The credit card debt is nuts.
So the credit card debt went down during the CUFIS. I like that term for it. I call it the COVIDs. And savings hit an all-time high because the government sent like the average family of four like 12 grand over like 18 months. But it's a funny thing. Even when people meet, and they also like people either saved it initially or they paid down debt with it. But it's like giving a drunk a couple bottles of whiskey, and he stops going out to the bar every night and hitting trees on the way home and shit. Because he stays home and gets drunk. Well, eventually he will work his way through the fifths of whiskey you gave him, and he'll be worse after the fact. And I think that's exactly what happened here. People got money. They felt really good about it. They paid down some debt, and then COVID ended and woohoo. And then they went all in, and then inflation hit on top of it. And it's just a mess. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've always kind of felt like, I would say for the past 20 plus years, longer than I've been doing the show, I've done fairly well economically. And when I go out to buy stuff, I don't just go out and buy Porsches and shit. But if I'm going to buy steak or something, I just buy what I want. Like in the last 2 years, I've actually made conscious purchasing decisions on base level shit, not luxury shit. And that's new for me. And I just sit back and think of like the 30 something who hasn't bought their first house yet, you know, that's trying to get by, that's saddled. Like, how do they even, and has a couple kids, how do they even do it? I don't even understand.
Yeah, I feel like I've been insulated from the economic situation in part because my lifestyle was already based around raising a bunch of food and keeping expenses low and buying whole animals and that sort of thing, right? Like I just bought for $5 a pound a quarter cow from somebody who had an extra one. And that's up $2 from what I used to spend on premium grass-fed beef, but it's still not the end of the world. However, it is absolutely true that looking at the budget is something I think about. And I think about, like when Unloose the Goose started, I was like the side hustle lady. And then Holler Roast really took off. And I've realized that to run one business, you have to not run 10 businesses. So I stopped doing as much of the side hustly stuff. And now I'm like, okay, so like if I need to make ends meet, what is my side hustle plan now? If there's a point where people don't want to buy the premium coffee, right? So it's been, sorry, John, I was trying to highlight your thing if you wanted to talk about it. But like, what does that look like? And the fact that I'm even starting to think that direction again is weird. And then I think about other people I know, like John Willis, who's like, just make more money, because part of your strategy is you need to make more money to make up the difference, because that's what the corporations are doing, right? They're reporting record profits. And I'm like, but when we adjust that for inflation, is it record profits or not? And do they basically have to do that to even stay afloat? And some of them, I'm sure, are making record profits, and it's awesome for them. But there's also the thing where if you don't, then you are going to go out of business.
Yeah. I think when it comes, because a huge piece of agorism is counter economics, entrepreneurship. And I think one insight for people that are getting started or that already have an existing business that may be struggling now is to identify what it is that people still need. Because people are shifting out of wants into needs now, and they're being much more choosy with their purchases, just like Jack was saying, right? And that's something too, like I've always been abundance mindset, maybe too much. My wife's dismay too. Like, oh, you're just being negative there. But it's like, no, maybe we should have tightened the belt a little bit sooner than when we're forced to tighten the belt, right? But regardless, if you're offering a product or service that is always in demand, and coffee, of course, comes to mind. Crap hits the fan. The economy's in the gutter. People are still going to be drinking coffee. But yeah, just try to offer goods and services that are useful, even if the economy is in the stinker. And just the same, let us all make better purchasing choices to buy those things which we really need. And of course, homesteading, nothing could be more important on that front as well. Whether crap hits the fan or not, if you could start producing more of your food off of your own land, it'll take a whole lot more of your energy, right? You'll burn more calories doing it. But ultimately, that's a huge step in becoming more independent.
Yeah, and you've really taken a lot of steps more into homesteading. Like you've been all in on that for a few years. Another example of an event that didn't like have a problem with attendance would be the Exit and Build Land Summit in May. Like you had that room packed.
John stacked bodies, man.
Yeah, I want to give credit where credit's due. It's a whole team behind me, but most people always just see me there dancing around on stage. We actually have sold more tickets pre-sale for Exit and Build Land Summit 5, which will be at Joel Salatin's Polyface Farms, than any like we have 50 tickets sold already.
Oh,
and it's
wow.
still not even 2025.
Yeah.
I think people are really excited to go work with Joel. But I just want to encourage people to keep pushing. And thankfully with the Land Summit, that was just something ever since the very first one, when like 28,000 people registered, I was like, whoa, this is an idea whose time has come. Everybody wants to get the heck out of the city and homestead and then, of course, build community with people, whether it's buying land together, which is a little niche that we're into, the intentional community deal, or at least connecting with your neighbors. Really, nothing's more important. And we've been banging on this for so long, but people are finally starting to be like, oh, yeah, probably just the same. Should have tightened the belt sooner. Should have went and shook hands with my neighbor sooner. Should have got the chicken coop set up in the back sooner. But yeah, we're looking forward to the next one. And for people that are doing events, entrepreneurship, content creation, whatever it may be, just want to encourage people to push through these difficult times, because if you just give up on your dreams, or if you allow the pressure, if you buckle under the pressure and then just like get into this yucky headspace, you're going to miss the opportunity to grow, because just like a diamond grows with pressure, so too do we become better versions of ourselves, better parents, better husbands and wives, better entrepreneurs when we push through the adversity. Within every adversity lies the seed of an equal or greater benefit. So think about that. It's a mindset shift. These trying times aren't happening to us. They're happening for us, so we can push through and be better equipped to build a better world on the other side.
Yeah, and when you do push through it and you're successful, then in good times you have the tools it takes to push, like to really grow. And
like
if you just give up, then yeah, you miss that chance. Okay, before we go into the election, I'm gonna target you, Jay. This is a headline from Newsweek. Armed militia hunting FEMA causes hurricane responders to evacuate. CJ, when you read that, what does your analytical mind want to do? Like, do you believe this headline?
No, it seems very, what's the hyperbolic, maybe they're sensationalistic. It's an attempt to create another boogeyman within, I suppose.
Yeah.
At the same time that our oligarchs are trying to, focus us on like 3 or 4 foreign wars at once, they also want to focus on the enemy within. And I foresee a lot of that increasing regardless of who wins. There's going to be increased scapegoating and increased, pretending that certain people are like dangerous terrorists who aren't, and whatever like that. It's classic deflection and projection propaganda.
Classic move.
Yeah, Jack, what do you think when you see that?
I'm kind of stuck on, you started out before we went off on this with corporations making record profits and how high inflation is now. and how those two things seem to be going together. And what it made me think of, I'm like, I think I talked about this in the past. And I would just, Nicole, if you could for me, if you could read the title of that episode and the date of that episode.
Okay, so this is March 9, 2009.
Yeah.
Recovery equals inflation.
And that's a podcast episode I did over 10 years ago. What is that? 13 years? Like, I'm not surprised by any of this. There's nothing about this that surprises me. What did you think would happen when we basically put the economy on steroids from a false god, basically? Like, we'll just pump money in, cut interest rates to shit to get the green. Remember the green shoots under Obama, the green shoots of the economy come back? Like, this was inevitable. And all of the things that we're seeing are just symptoms of a cancer that we gave ourselves. Like, have you ever dealt with somebody, and it's a horrible thing, I don't want to belittle the person dealing with it, but somebody that's like 70 years old and they've smoked 3 packs a day for their whole life, and then they get a diagnosis of lung cancer and they're like, I can't believe it. And you're like, well, honestly, I feel bad for you. I hope you make it, but what did you think was going to happen? Like, that's how I feel like where we are right now is. Like, we did this. So when I say, I don't mean everybody out there. I mean, like, our people in charge did this to us, and they did it to themselves. And now everybody's like, oh, gee, I can't believe this happened. But I really do look at it like the person that smoked 3 packs of no filter Camels for 70 years and now can't understand why they have cancer. Like, this is just, of course, this is the result.
I saw that militia thing broadcast all over the place. And then I was sitting with Sean Mills, and he's like, somebody had a gun somewhere. And somebody came up there and saw the gun and said, don't go up there because there's a person with a gun. But everybody has a gun.
Yeah. I think there's definitely, But, I mean, we're supposed to be talking about the election today, and I think that there is, like, all of this dis-ease coupled with absolute lunatic fringe level pushback by the media because they can't accept that Orange Man 2.0 is actually probably going to happen, is creating a very dangerous situation, no matter who wins, but especially if Trump wins. And of the two candidates, like, I don't like either one of them, but if you gun to my head, pick one, I'm picking Orange Man. I still think that we have, like, the people have bought into not the legitimate criticisms, the absolute lunatic criticisms. And so what would you do if you really believed the reincarnation of Hitler just became your president? What wouldn't you do? Right? Especially if you're already predisposed to be kind of nuts, like to try to take a shot at the president with an AK-47 that has a electrical tape scope on it. Like, what wouldn't you do? Like, so we've already seen some of that. And I think we're going to, like, I don't want to be anywhere near any of the city centers on election night. I'll just put it that way. And for a couple of weeks afterwards.
Do you realize our first Tuesday coffee chat with John Willis is the first Tuesday in November?
Yeah, I do.
That's going to be. Yeah.
Well,
let's go straight into the election because it seems like everybody wants to go there. Weird shit. Let's talk about election weird shit.
Yeah.
That has happened
already
in the last 3 months. CJ, you did a pretty good episode on the post-Trump analysis plus other weird shit. Why don't you tell us some initial thoughts about weird shit?
Well, I mean, this campaign season has just been the wildest of my lifetime, that's for sure. And the wildest we've had since maybe 1968, something like that.
Agreed.
You know, where you have Lyndon in 1968 is where Lyndon Johnson decided not to run for another term, even though he could have, because he was so unpopular due to Vietnam. And then you had RFK, the original RFK, as, you know, the favorite in the Democratic primary and probably at least somewhat the favorite in the general, you know, running as an anti-war candidate and all that stuff. Then he gets killed under shady circumstances by a guy who sure does seem very MK Ultra'd. And on and on and on and on. And Nixon wins, but most people forget in '68 he won by a razor thin margin. And that's against the background of all the late '60s craziness with the demonstrations and the hippie stuff and racial violence in a lot of the cities. Martin Luther King's assassination earlier that year. So I think you'd have to go back to 1968 to find a campaign just with so much drama, with so much, things that only happen like once every 50, 60 years kind of thing. And so we had two fairly serious assassination attempts against Trump, both of which look just like fishy as hell as soon as you start digging into any of the details. And it's not just even the stuff that we know doesn't add up in terms of the official story, but it's also, there's so much we don't know. Like I think it shows you how much our rulers have decided to stop even with like the pretense of democracy, where like they're not even doing like big PR stunts of like, we're going to go in detail and explain, like, here's where we found the would-be assassin's rifle. Here's the exact kind of ammunition. Like, they're not even doing all that stuff that used to be considered standard in situations like this. Then you add in on top of that, the whole suddenly everyone realizes Biden is demented, so, after not noticing it on purpose for 5 years, and then you have Kamala coming in and this crazy propaganda push behind her that it's like juicing someone up on amphetamines to pep them up. But then it fizzles out. I feel like that's what happened with the Kamala propaganda campaign. It's like for a month or two there, it was working, and suddenly like everybody, her approval rating had been like around 30% her entire time as vice president. And then all of a sudden she's got like 51% approval ratings after the entire propaganda apparatus just goes nuts behind her. And now you've got it, swinging back the other way. And, there's probably 100 other crazy events I'm leaving out, but those are just some of the big ones. And yeah, it's just, it's what makes it, and then you combine that with potential three-front World War III brewing, with the economic, collapse that's brewing. And it's like, we are in really unprecedented waters on multiple fronts. And it makes it very hard to make any kind of predictions with any degree of confidence as to how this is all going to play out. Because we got like 5 black swans going at once.
Not good.
Is anybody here voting?
No.
Okay, John,
No,
you're about to say something.
I'm not.
Oh, you're not
This
yet.
is probably the only podcast you're going to get with election commentary with 4 fucking hosts, and none of us are going to vote for anything.
Yeah, I think we have too much dignity and self-respect, to be honest.
I'll be honest, if I lived in a swing state, I'd be tempted to throw a vote for Trump, not because I actually believe he's going to be our political messiah and fix everything, but just as a middle finger to the establishment.
Isn't that the real thing that's driving Trump's popularity with all but the true believers? Because I'm seeing people saying things like this on social media. I've been an anarchist for a decade. I haven't voted in 20 years. I'm voting this year, and I'm voting for Trump.
Yeah.
I've watched the LP, which is politically a joke, but I mean, they are a significant body count, pretty much just abandon their nominee, which I've never seen. And basically the LP's like, yeah, we all know that all of our people are voting for Trump. There'll be 2-3% of the LP party that will vote for whoever the hell they put in. I don't even know. And the rest of the all the libertarians on X, which is like the biggest network effect where you actually see what people are saying now, are all in on Trump. And a lot of them are like, I don't like him, but he's this to the establishment. And I really believe he is this to the establishment. Like, there are people that say he's a plant and all. I think he's an infiltrated candidate, but he's not a plant. If he was a plant, he wouldn't have been convicted on 34 felonies on a single misdemeanor. Like, you don't go after somebody that hard if they're a plant. And so my question for y'all is, he gets sentenced. I don't know if people realize it's like 2 weeks after the election. What happens if that judge says he has to do 12 months in New York's jail or New York's prison system? What happens then?
We got to really beef up security at the prison.
There's nothing that prevents that judge from doing that. You understand that? Or puts him on house arrest and says he can't leave the state of New York, he has to stay in his apartment. Or God knows what else. And for all the people out there that believe in magic and unicorns, right? Because that's why I got my unicorn mug today. Yes, the president probably can get away with pardoning himself from a federal crime. A president can't do jack diddly shit to pardon you from a state crime. So he sure can't do it for himself. You think Hochul's going to pardon? Like, oh, we have to like heal the wounds or whatever? Or here's another mess. Trump wins landslide. Waiting for him an hour after inauguration is the resurrection of the conviction of the last impeachment that was never tried in the Senate. Now, are they going to get him removed in the Senate with that? No. But can you hamstring the United States Senate for that first 100 days? Not the whole 100 days, but at the beginning of that first 100 days? Can you open? Do you think they'll do it? I do. My prediction is that case gets resurrected and kicked to the Senate, if there's any way they can do it, within hours of him putting his hand out, assuming he wins. And I just see a mess. I don't give a shit who wins. I see a total mess here. Because I also don't think the hardcore Trump supporters, I don't care what the election night results end up being or the next day or whatever, will ever accept that Harris really won. So you've got massive tension right now. Like, this is, if you wanted to spin up a recipe for what, if not civil war, major domestic strife looks like, this is what you would do. CJ's nodding his head. What do you think on that, man?
Yeah, it's a real powder keg, tinderbox, or whatever you want to call it, where, feeding the high, high strunkedness of everybody is all these, economic things that are stressing us all out to various degrees. And then, yeah, we're in a situation where, because the hardcore, I'm not talking about a libertarian who votes for Trump as a lesser of two evils or as a FU to the establishment, but like the hardcore Trump supporters and the hardcore TDS crowd, both of them are for multiple years have been steeped in a narrow propaganda little bubble that tells them that their side's going to win in a landslide no matter what, and anything short of that is an illegitimate election. And so I think it's true that regardless of who wins or the details of how they win, what the breakdown is of the popular vote, the electoral vote, and whatever, regardless, there's going to be a significant percentage of the people of this country who, no matter how it shakes out, are going to see it as, we were robbed, this is illegitimate, this is criminal. And this is, I mean, this is the sort of thing that tears a republic apart, where where a significant percent of the population no longer believes in the basic legitimacy of the system, in terms of that you actually can trust that your vote was counted in the way it was supposed to be counted. And there's so many different ways you can manipulate and rig elections. Some of them are, kind of small and petty, like actually, stuffing a ballot box and that sort of thing. But then there's the bigger things are illegal immigrants voting? How much? Where are they doing so? Is it really having and you can't trust anybody's explanation of that. You can't, if I don't know, the Border Patrol or somebody comes on TV and says, oh yeah, we know that it's, no illegals are voting. It's like, yeah, but no one's going to believe you. All we have now, in terms of quote unquote proof for claims the establishment makes, all they have is the argument from authority, and far fewer people every day believe in that authority. So, there's a real crisis of legitimacy, not just for one particular party or candidate. There's a crisis of legitimacy for the system as a whole. And I am going to be putting out some dangerous history in the next couple of weeks, really digging into this concept of oligarchy and the way in which our system really has always been an oligarchy, but where we're at in recent times, it's at the point where the fiction that we live in this democratic republic, it's always been a fiction. And there's always been a real gap between the civics textbook version of what our system is and what it actually is and how it actually operates. But that gap has gotten so huge in the last decade or two that the fictional, the load-bearing narrative fiction of our system that we get in 7th grade civics class is so divorced from reality that even a lot of NPCs are, going to start, if they're not already, waking up and going, I can't believe this system at all. It is not at all what they sold it to me as and what they told me it was in 7th grade.
You know, I think you have to take CJ's comment and make sure you understand what the system is. And it's why I often use the term systems, just to make sure people do that. Because no, people right now do not trust the electoral system or the legislative system or the bureaucratic system, right? You know what else they don't trust, though? By and large, they do not trust the media. Like, the media seems to have just figured that out. They put out on NBC of all places, put out a study that says people no longer trust the media. They just figured out people don't trust them, you know. But people don't. I mean, Bezos, who bought I think the Washington Post or Washington Examiner, something like that, he just did an op-ed that said, bluntly, people don't trust the media anymore, right? So we don't trust. Who here trusts the medical establishment? Does any one of our hosts that trust the medical establishment or doctors in general, even if you like your individual doctor right now? I don't see anybody saying they do. Does anybody trust science, TM, right now? No. So it's a complete, total structural confidence failure in every major institution that Americans have traditionally had at least some trust in, has gone to close to zero as you can get, I think, before everything just falls apart. I think that's what CJ's stabbing at there, that like when you have that confidence crisis in everything at once, it's inevitable that eventually you have a complete unraveling.
Yep. Yeah. And it's almost, maybe it is I'm just leaving myself the out that there's maybe one I'm not thinking of, but it seems like virtually every major institution, regardless of whether it's, quote unquote, public or private, is really just beyond the point of no return in terms of losing its legitimacy. Another one I think of that, in the long run might have some great benefits to our civilization, if we can come through to the long run, if we can make it to the long run, is academia. The world that I was in for 20 some years, counting my time as a student and as a professor. And, academia has been an ideologically captured progressive monolith for over a century at this point. But again, sort of like with the fiction that we've got this, representative republic as a system and not an oligarchy, it's like the story that academia is this, dispassionate arena of acquiring and refining knowledge and transmitting it to the next generation. That's pretty much always been a lie. But again, it's like, how much of a lie is it? What is the divergence? What is the delta between the fictional, narrative of what this institution is and what it's doing versus what it actually is and what it's actually doing? It's like that delta just has gotten so ridiculously wide. I don't know how anybody could look at, and it's not even just like in certain subjects. Like for a long time, everybody kind of knew like, oh yeah, if you do women's studies or, African-American studies or whatever, like that's just going to be a bunch of woke stuff. But it's like, no, now you're going to get some woke stuff in physics, now you're going to be in chemistry class and somehow they'll be putting in, blatant, not even subtle propaganda. And so, academia is another example of one of these just institutions that is probably at a point where it will never regain the credibility and legitimacy in the eyes of the general public that it used to have just a couple generations ago.
I think there, as the token conspiracy guy, there's a case to be made that the loss of legitimacy in all of these institutions, which have maintained comfort, order, stability in America and abroad, is creating the perfect opportunity to insert a new system or systems called technocracy. We can't trust the voting. We can't trust the justice system. We can't trust the legislature. We can't trust all of it, public health, you name it. So what can we trust? Maybe we can trust algorithms. Maybe we can trust the scientific dictatorship, right? That's where I think there could be an element of this going, because it's all just too perfect and, order out of chaos, problem, reaction, solution. But on the same token, I think that could benefit our agorist movement as well, because for more people to see that the state is in fact illegitimate, and it was never legitimate, it's always just been a total myth, as CJ was saying, it makes it easier for us to encourage people to experiment with alternative means of social organization. And I want to point out too, when it comes to Trump, one of the things that I'm worried about I've been doing this Vote for Nobody campaign, and we did this town hall. The replay is still available at exitandbuild.com. And people are getting real triggered by the whole Vote for Nobody thing. I tell you what. And it's not just vote for nobody and stay at home and do nothing, of course. It's vote for nobody, exit and build instead.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the challenge with even voting for the lesser of two evils, and we think Trump is anti-establishment, so we're throwing our vote, is a lot of people, they feel as though Trump's got it taken care of, or there's just such this behemoth enemy of freedom that we're never going to be able to take it on ourselves. It's going to take some big strong man with a huge movement and the full weight of the United States government to push back on this deep state. But one of the things I'm seeing is a lot of people are falsely believing that Trump's this independent maverick. And I'm with Jack. I don't think that Trump himself is a plant. Like the whole thing is some kind of psyop. I do think that he is being leveraged. And of course, the number one play, just like the central banks always fund both sides of the war, the Bilderberg Group and the steering committee members of the Bilderberg Group, like Eric Schmidt, is backing Kamala. And then Peter Thiel, another steering committee member, also another big tech bro, is backing Trump. And then, of course, we say Trump's anti-establishment. But one thing that's come to my attention more so than ever before, and having been a conspiracy guy for over 2 decades, there's always the people, and let's hope the stream doesn't get cut, that are like, it's the Jews that are behind everything. The Jews are behind everything, right? Let me say it 3 times to make sure we get cut. And I was always like, no, that's not the case. It's this, all these disparate groups, and there's the Council on Foreign Relations, blah, 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 blah. And I don't think it's one monolithic Jewish conspiracy by any means, but after what's taken place in Gaza, and I will call it a genocide, call a spade, it could be debated, but that's my view of everything. 40,000 killed, and most of them are women and children. And then you see them like pushing people to the north, and then let's bomb the north. Like there's nowhere to go. They're cutting off aid supplies. And then to see everybody, even my former hero, Elon Musk, who I looked up to so much, mostly entrepreneurial, to see him fall in line and then go kiss the ring of Netanyahu. Let's be extremely clear that both Kamala and Trump are completely in the pocket of Israel and huge, massive donors, giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump. So everyone's focused on Trump not starting any new wars when he was president. He expanded every single one of them and dropped more bombs, no more drone bombs, and killed more civilians with those drones than Obama before him. But let's not let our guard down and think Trump's some anti-war guy like Ron Paul, because he's very much beating the war drum for Iran, and it's very much playing into the favor of Israel, who may be the real puppet string pullers at the end of the day.
So let's look at best case scenario for who Trump is. Let's say Trump really is anti-war, and all his blithering and yelling and bantering is, 1, to get elected, and 2, because in his own words, I want them to think I'm a little crazy. It's easier to negotiate when let's say that's true. I don't believe it because John's uncomfortable. Like, I don't believe it. I'm giving best case scenario. So, and then let's give best case scenario on who he's going to appoint. So the word out of RFK, who I probably trust more than any of these people and still don't trust, is that Trump's funding his own transition team. He's not waiting until after the election where the party or the government pays for it or whatever. He's funding it out of pocket. He hasn't selected in a single corporate lobbyist, and it's usually all corporate lobbyists. Again, these are RFK's words, not mine. And he's going to appoint all these people, and Tulsi and Elon and RFK are already members that have already been selected for specific positions. Let's say all that's true. One of the things we got off of Rogan, and I never really kind of understood the numbers and the ratio, is that the president appoints about 100 people right off the bat, and they all appoint about 10. Right? So that's 1,000 more appointments that are made by your cabinets. How much infiltration, even if everything is the way that the true Orange Man believers that think the great Trumpkin is rising again with Linus and Lucy in the field, right? If all that's true, how many infiltrators does it take into that 1,000 to completely derail and direct everything? Because the people at the top never really do much, do they? They kind of like oversee the worker bees, right? Like in the military, we have a term called E4 Mafia. And that's because no matter how high you go, if the specialists and PFCs want to derail your shit, guess what they're going to do? They're going to derail your shit. You have to get along with the lower enlisted because they're the backbone of the system. I see that even if it were the best case scenario, because that's what John said, one of the things he wanted to talk about no matter what, I think he said Davos or somebody, somebody from that side will have their person in. And I think we need to change that to people, right? I think that there will be infiltrators in that system, even and I don't think it's the best case scenario, just to be clear.
Yeah. Well, RFK still has to get approved by the Senate. It's not just that Trump wants him in, and Trump's never even come out and said, I'm going to make RFK the head of the FDA or the head of Health and Human Services or whatever. But, they definitely are pretty cozy. But Trump's made a whole lot of political promises that he's completely backpedaled on. Yeah. And there's I don't know. Another thing I'm worried about with this Trump stuff is in my Vote for Nobody campaign, pointing out very basic things that I thought we were all on the same page with, like, boy, that sure was despicable of Trump to spearhead Operation Warp Speed. And even if he learned better now, he sure as hell is clinging to it.
No, he's proud of it, isn't he? He's very proud.
He's totally proud of it. I saved him too many lives.
Let me ask you this, though, John. If he would fulfill one promise he's made, one and only one, free Ross, is it worth 4 years of Orange Man to have Ross Albright out of federal prison instead of spending his rest of his life there?
So I see the argument, and I see that a whole lot of people got on board with that. I'm still not going to vote for him for that reason.
Neither am I.
I know it's a huge thing, right? And there's a whole lot of other political prisoners as well. Like Roger Ver now is another political prisoner. And let's not forget Assange hasn't been completely pardoned and all that stuff. So, that's a tough one because my heart goes out to Lynn and that whole movement, and I've done what I can to help promote it or anything. It's not something that's going to draw me to vote. And I'm just like with you. If I had a gun to my head, I would choose Trump. But I do think that there is a bit of a deception there too, because like everyone making excuses for Operation Warp Speed, which is inexcusable. Everyone blaming Biden on the economy when Trump inflated the currency by 40%. And then when you bring that up, they're like, no, it was actually the central bank. It's like, yeah, he's the one that inked all the damn bills that created all the money, right? He played a role in it. That's for damn sure. I fear, and then they say I have Trump derangement syndrome for making all these rational arguments and pointing out facts, right? It's a quick, easy way to just like you're a Nazi or you're racist. You don't have to really, have a discourse. I worry that as he goes strongman and as everyone's ego is so attached to supporting him that they're going to make excuses for him when maybe he's rapidly accelerating the police state, not to mention the surveillance state. It's just different. There's always a cunning way to implement this predator class technology and technocracy. So it's like CBDCs, Kamala's just pushing CBDCs wholeheartedly, not like as a campaign thing or anything, but the Biden Kamala regime, Obama regime's moving it forward, Clinton regime. And then you're like, Trump speaks out against CBDCs. Yeah, but they're also in favor of dollar-backed stable coins, which will most definitely be centralized. It's not going to be some decentralized stable coin. And as we know with Tether, those can be censored and stopped. Same thing with digital ID. Kamala's pushing digital ID just in general. It's basically what's happened in the EU is going to happen here in the US under the Kamala regime. But with Trump, it's going to be, well, we got all these illegal immigrants and yeah, it's a massive inflow. And we definitely should be concerned with how that's shaping the culture. But they're going to say, we need to have voter ID, digital ID. We need to have these biometric surveillance checkpoints when coming into the country. And it's only for the immigrants and people with the visa. But of course, it always expands. And I don't know if anybody's flown internationally lately, but they got those biometric face scanners. You can opt out of them. That was pushed forward under the Trump regime. So no matter who gets in office, yeah, Davos wins, the Bilderbergs win, Israel wins, and the technocracy continues to march on. Meanwhile, we're debating and fighting over these surface level issues. The ultimate goal of this New World Order thing that's been in play for over 100 years is to create a top-down centralized control grid. And the technology exists to do it. And the politicians are being played in a way to continue moving it forward.
I mean, does anybody actually think that Trump will come in and clean the swamp based on his track record last time he was president?
He was all swamped out.
He's
got swamp ass.
It's no surprise, right? There's nothing that indicates that anything will really change. Some things may go slightly a different direction if he's elected than the other direction, but they're all leading to the same endpoint. And so at that point, what does it matter? It matters a little bit for people who want a small surge in the economy, probably if Trump is elected, or a slowdown of the carnage. But the system, unless the system is replaced, the system is the system, or as Jack would say, the systems are the systems.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of our people are going to go back to sleep too. And that urgency, that sense of urgency where at least they're doing stuff. I mean, hopefully they're not just only doing voting and politics and arguing online, but the people that are like exiting and building and they're like, we got to really put the money together to get out of the city. They're going to be like, oh, okay, everything's going to be okay. Our guy's in office, or at least the anti-establishment guy. And a huge chunk of our following, our collective following, they're going to go back to sleep. Just like after Obama took office, the anti-war movement got completely psyoped and deflated by the DNC, all by design. It's the same thing.
That's the case. The media always gives the left a pass on war. So we always drop more bombs when we have a Democrat president than when we have a Republican president. It's not that the Republicans won't drop bombs. It's that there's no check by the media at all when their side's in power. And this is part of the lack of confidence. When you treat people differently for doing the same thing based on their last initial after their name, people sooner or later start to go, wait a minute. Like all those people, like you remember, John, because you were big in activism back at that time, the rise of Obama and all. There were millions of people in the streets protesting war. And yes, that whole movement went away. But do you think those people forgot that they were opposed to the individuals? I don't think they did. But you also bring up a good point. Like I talked about this last week, that like my buddy and I went to a gun show in Texas in December of 2016 after Trump won. Gun shows for the 8 years before that were like going to a fucking party. I mean, it was like you walked in and you felt energy like you were at a concert. Everybody was excited. Everybody was talking. Everybody was buying guns. Everybody was selling guns. We walked into this thing. You know, Trump's not even sworn in yet. And we walked in and you felt like there was half the people normally there. Nobody was buying everything. Everybody was chill because nobody was worried what was coming next. And I do think there is some of that slumber in some portion. But I also think there are the people that are really activists about things. They don't change what they believe in. You know, but they might change what they believe is happening, I guess.
Or they may decide it's okay to trade the one thing that quote unquote matters because of the aggregate other progress somewhere else. The danger of being a one issue person is you are willing to run over other people's freedoms to further your position. And if you do that, you set up a mechanism by which your pet project also becomes not possible or undermined.
And I would say, yeah, this is not picking a side, just an observation. Democrats as a whole are more willing to do that than Republicans. Like, I think one of the reasons Republicans lose so frequently is Democrats will do anything. They have no concern whatsoever about cheating, breaking rules, violating their own principles. Republicans will do it too. I'm just saying Democrats will do it more. There's also an odd thing going on right now. And I don't know if anybody else has noticed this and wondered if there's a correlation between the propping up of the education system to the point where we have morons with college degrees. What party was the party of the working class in the minds of the average person for the last 70 years, or really more, almost 100 years? Democrats, right? Yeah. Like even back in the racist days, it's still, even some of the people would hold their nose because they were the party of the working class. JFK years, party of the working class, right? All the way through even Reagan. Reagan seldom had any real help out of Congress because the Democrats maintained a pretty tight stranglehold of Congress throughout those 8 years. And Reagan was an incredibly popular president. The Democrats were the party of the working class, and the working class person reached out and voted for Reagan because things weren't working, but they split their vote. There's a lot of vote splitting during the Reagan administration. The Republican Party right now is becoming the party of the working class. The unions, like you might find a little individual union chapter, supporting Kamala, but they're all Trump. The working people are Trump. But the working class outnumbered the degreed class for most of our history. As that shifted, all of a sudden, the Democrats are the party of the elites. The Democrats are the party of the educated. I just don't really see that as a coincidence.
And the Republicans do tend to do policies that help the working man more.
Now,
and then the pushback is, tax cuts for the rich, but a smaller impact tax cut on a lower income earner is a bigger deal than the bigger impact but low percentage of total income on a higher income person. But try to make that argument to anybody on the street, and they're just going to look at me like eyes crossed.
Well, if I cut everybody's taxes, the person that pays more taxes gets a bigger cut.
Yep.
And part of this is we have this entire progressive system in the first place where I pay a higher tax rate than somebody that makes less money than me, and somebody that makes more money than me pays a higher tax rate. When they talk about fair share, my opinion of tax, it's all theft, so there is no fair share. But if we're going to pretend there is, then wouldn't a fair share be everybody being taxed equally? Doesn't that, make sense? Wouldn't we not have a corporation like General Electric paying no taxes at all? That wouldn't happen if we actually had a, fair tax, which I don't believe you can because it's all cheating. But if it was going to be fair theft, wouldn't we thieve from everybody equally then? I think we could run the whole country on a 10% flat rate income tax with no exemptions other than a company did it make a profit or not, because you can't tax the no profit.
I just want to encourage listeners to think outside the ballot box and to recognize really what it is that we're up against. People identify the deep state. That's the catchy term, right? We used to call it the shadow government. It's clear that there's a permanent state systems that are operating from behind the scenes. They're completely unelected, and they have some pretty ambitious goals to reshape the economy, to reshape finances, to reshape food, to reshape health, to reshape education, to reshape it all, to reshape how we work with one another. And this group is making massive, massive gains, especially after COVID. It all accelerated. And we're here arguing about the next election, focusing on 4 years or focusing on how we're going to pay rent next month. And meanwhile, the true enemies of freedom are focusing on entire generations of shifting and socially engineering. And we may think that we're small and we're always playing defense. And what power do we have to shift the course of history? But let us not forget, it was always a tiny, tireless minority, an irate, tireless minority that has started brush fires in the minds of men, right? Liberty brush fires in the minds of men. And so I just want to encourage people, we got to think more of ourselves. We got to get out of this victim mentality, and we got to make massive shifts in how we organize, how we trade, how we communicate, what kind of currencies we use. And we got to start thinking big, because we outnumber them, but they badly out-organize us. And unless we want to be caught in this reactionary trap where we're always arguing over the lesser of two evils, focused on the policy of the day, meanwhile, the future generations are going to be born with digital ID, social credit score, completely enslaved. And we're not going to be able to have shows like this in the future. You can't have a show like this in China. That's the model for the world. I just think we got to think outside the box, and we got to believe in our ability to enact real change on a big, massive scale, not just playing defense by voting for some ass clown.
And to tag on to that, enacting change on a massive scale can be done by taking very small steps. Lots of people doing small things.
Decentralized.
And because, if you look at what happened with Bitcoin, is it happened as sort of this fringe movement that everybody thought wasn't a big deal until it was way too late.
Until it was.
And that is the power that we have. It's like, well, I'm just not going to participate. I'm not just going to wait for FEMA and the government to rebuild the roads. We're just going to get some dump trucks out here and bring in material and make a road that's good enough, even if it's not up to state code, because people got to get from point A to point B. Literally, if we take individual responsibility for ourselves and the community around us, that stops a lot of the dependence that we have on waiting for the government to frickin' fix something. They're not coming. That's why when people say you are your own first responder, you literally are. If you have an arterial bleed in your pocket, you have a way, like a tourniquet, you're gonna improve your chance of making it somewhere where you can get that wound healed. But if you're not willing to take that step because you're waiting for some dude in an ambulance to come put it on you, and you've got 90 seconds before you bleed out, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's a really profound statement, John. Just like, we can do it. We just got to all be willing to do it.
We got to believe in our ability to do it.
But John, you were kind of alluding to things there that sounded very much like, common sense and Thomas Paine and heading to revolution at some point, if you're going to have massive change and organize. And I would just like to say there's a lot of people that maybe need to listen to the Beatles song about that, because as our historian, CJ, of all the revolutions that have occurred in history, how many worked out really well, like the American Revolution did? What percentage would you throw a swag at?
Oh, probably less than 10%.
Yeah. Most revolutions result in things getting worse. If you look at Iran would be a perfect thing, or if I want to pretend to be intellectual, I'll say Iran, right? The students in the 70s who were part of the revolution in Iran, who helped take a bunch of Americans hostage, do you think that they thought they were getting an Ayatollah-led theocracy, CJ, or did they think they were just getting rid of the Shah and they were going to have independent, leadership of their country? Which one do you think they thought they were getting?
Yeah, exactly. They probably thought they were going to revert back to the path Iran was on before 1953, which was in the direction of, kind of secular Western style democracy under Mossadegh.
What they had without us, right? Like that's just
before the CIA got involved.
Yeah. Just get rid of Western control, but maintain Western style government self-governing. That's what they thought they were getting. What they got was, everybody in burqa, right? So they're probably not going to try to put Americans in burqas. That won't work really well. But they'll come up with some other means of control. And like John alluded to, like CBDCs will definitely be part of that. The CBDC thing, everybody focuses on the end game instead of how you implement it. Right. So if you just go straight to the end game with a CBDC, you're not going to get it implemented. But if you say, well, we've decided that we are going to actually give everybody money. Right. We're going to do, what do they call that shit where everybody gets money every month?
UBI.
We're going to do UBI. And if you want your UBI, then we have to deposit it in your bank account.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So then they make like it's actually hard to do this. This is not hard to do at all. Right. You can roll out a digital currency in like 5 minutes if you want to. Right. And especially if you're the government, you could do it really, really easy. So basically all that happens is a number gets appended to every bank account. And if you click a box, then you get money in it. If you don't click a box, you don't get money in it. Or maybe we just give you the money whether you want it or not. How long do you think you have to keep people on that system before threatening to take it away matters to them? If it's the current situation, I would say about 5 days. So then people will defend the thing they would have resisted. And then you can start tightening the controls. Well, at least of your UBI money. Well, we have a carbon problem. So you can only spend X percentage of your UBI money on these things in these categories, but do whatever you want with your only money. But how long before those two worlds bridge together and all the money becomes CBDC? And then you can say, you can't spend it on this. You can't spend it on that. You've exceeded your allocation. You pissed off the state. You don't get yours this month, right? You said bad things. And then right on that, they probably won't call it this, but they'll come up with some version of China's central social credit score. Like, I think that is the goal of the elite globally, is to get everybody on some version of that system. It probably won't look exactly the same, because then you have the illusion of choice, right? Illusion of difference. And I can sum that up with department stores, right? If you go to a department store, like an old school, like Sears used to be, on the first floor, you have hardware, you have games and pool tables and all kinds of shit, jewelry, perfume, everything, and men's clothes. Go to the second floor, it's all women's clothes. The whole floor is women's clothes, because women are more subject to this when it comes to buying clothes than we are. They want the illusion of choice. Like 80% of the shit that's on that floor, nobody's ever going to buy. It's used to sell the 20%. So you create this illusion of difference. So I think they will create some sort of social credit CBDC system in our country, but it will still look different to the average Yahoo than what China has. But I think that's the goal.
It's coming. They'll also be able to roll it out easily through Social Security payments.
That might be where it's Social Security, all government payments.
Tax return.
Your tax return, like food stamps. And they'll say, look how great this is. We don't have to worry about fraud anymore with food stamps, right? You can't even, like, I can't even take my food stamps and sell them to John. I know they call them something different now. And then I'll take like 70% so I can go buy drugs. They'll just say, like, once it's earmarked, we'll stop. And this is how you get Republicans on board, right? We'll stop all the abuse of the food stamp. Mm-hmm. We'll stop it. We'll prevent people from spending it on drugs and things they're not supposed to buy. It'll be impossible. Even if you transfer it, we'll know you did it and who you transferred it to. You'll have to have your private and public key to spend it. It'll be great. You have to put your card in at the grocery store and thumbprint it. And if it doesn't match and the transfer hasn't been registered, look how great this is. No more welfare payments to people on drugs. See how wonderful this is? You guys like this, Republicans, you know?
Well, before we move on to the fun stuff, which is the solutions part of the episode.
This isn't fun?
And I mean, it is. Or I've been driving around a lot, like long trips, whatever. Jack, you have too. CJ, you flew to Tennessee recently. I don't know what John's been doing.
I went to the UK.
As far as driving. But we are a week away from an election right now, and I drove across the state of Tennessee, which we know statistically is going to go for Trump. And usually at this time in the election cycle, I would see signs just plastered on people's yards supporting one candidate or the other, you know, flags everywhere, all of that. And there are a few houses with that, but I have never seen so few election signs as this year. And the things people are talking about politically or as far as interest, even like in my social feeds, and I don't know if this is because I've, you know, gotten rid of frantic people out of my life or what. Not, I mean, there's some stuff about the election, or there's like people went nuts about the militia in North Carolina on my sort of like left-leaning Democrat side of the friend. They were like, there's guys with guns out there shooting people. And I'm like, that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen such disinterest in a presidential election in your lifetime?
I actually think I see more interest overall. Less signs, less yard signs and stuff like that. But there was a report out recently that less people see this election as essential than the last election. That was, and it was a significant percentage of decline. And it was pretty equal among Republicans and Democrats. And so they're saying that maybe people will be less motivated to vote. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a mix to me. I'm not seeing what you're talking about like I usually do, especially here in Texas. Like, it's Trump country. There's Trump signs everywhere. I'm not seeing that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's people not wanting to attract attention to themselves, though, because, you know, there's like, if you watched any part of the rally that Trump just did, which obviously was Nazi because Nazis were there in 1939. So I guess that means like the New York Rangers hockey team are all Nazis, and
Billy Joel is a Nazi.
Billy Joel's a Nazi. What's his name? The guy from Australia, with the top selling Elton John's a Nazi. They're all Nazis because they were there too. But there was kind of a push in that, an undercurrent of stop being afraid. Stop being afraid to wear your MAGA hat. Stop being afraid to tell people. Stop hiding who you are. It's okay to come out as a Trump supporter. Like I heard that undertone in the little bits of it that I listened to. And to me, that's hinting at what Nicole's saying.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot here in North Florida. It's very much Trump country. And I don't know, I'm seeing a lot of like even flags on flagpoles in people's yards, you know, with Trump. I don't know. I'm not seeing a muted like response to the election. And I will say this has just been interesting. I've noticed a lot over the past, I don't know, month or two when I'm just out in the world, you know, at the store or whatever. I've been seeing in my area, at least, I have no idea how this tracks in other parts of the country, but I've been seeing a lot specifically of older Black men with Trump and MAGA stuff.
Yes, definitely.
Like a lot. And I don't know if it's just my area. I think I get the sense that there's a lot of retired military in my area, and that I think there's probably a little bit more Black right-wingers than in much of the rest of the country, because there's some, you know, retired, like, you know, Black career military people and whatever around me or whatever. But whatever the explanation is, I don't remember seeing this 4 years ago or 8 years ago. Just like noticing older black men like ostentatiously in public wearing like
Yes.
very bright, loud Trump shirts and hats and whatever.
Yep.
Just been very interesting.
I would agree with that. And I think so. I said I think it's a mixed bag, and this is also why I wonder if the polls are really as close as they say they are. Even the so-called internal polls that give more of an edge to Orange Man, because who's replacing these people that are the most reliable Democratic constituents in all time, right? Like, I think black men are breaking like 58% for Trump right now. 58%. That's insane. With a rant like generic Democrat ballot, like that's not typical. Latinos are especially males, breaking very, very hard for Trump. So I know the abortion issues in there and all, and women gravitate to one side of that issue, but I just don't understand when you look at all of those demographics that have been reliably blue voters publicly making very, like CJ saying, very clear statements. I'm on board over here. And I think you have to look at people like that, kind of like a company back in the old days before social media, when everybody could just click like. When you got a letter from somebody saying, you guys fucked up and this product sucks, every one of those letters, your marketing department said is 10 people. And I kind of see that kind of the canary coal mine thing here with some of these people. Like, for every one of those people you see, there's a lot more of them that aren't willing to do that. Like, even when I was in the system 20 years ago and I voted, I didn't go around with shirts on with politicians' names. I didn't put out signs. I thought people that did were stupid back then. Like, and my father-in-law was big on that. I'm like, Fred, nobody gives a shit about the sign in your yard. But I'm seeing more of that now, like CJ's saying. At the same time, I'm seeing less of the signage. I am not seeing the signage here at all. I'm not seeing it for anybody, Nicole.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Like, I've seen the railroad commissioner,
3 Kamala signs and maybe 4 or 5 households with Trump. Like,
yeah.
And some of them are like all the Trump signs all over the yard. But yeah,
but
it's
I'm
not
more to like state reps, state senators, like all that shit. You usually see like wherever they're allowed to put signs, you see like 50 signs and they're all different. And there's like a Trump and Kamala right. Like, that's what I'm not seeing. And I'm not seeing it again for the state level, local level positions that it's always been there. And I don't know if they're connected or correlated or what, but I'm not seeing that.
Maybe they can't afford this. Maybe fewer donations are going to the smaller stuff, and people can't afford the damn sign.
That's what Ashley said.
Wow.
The economy's so bad, people can't afford the signs. But you can make your own sign.
We were about to have some made that said vote for nobody. It ended up taking too long, and the election's right around the corner.
Yeah.
But they were like just the typical corrugated yard signs. They were $5 a pop. So imagine, as a candidate getting enough to actually have an impact, because you don't want to get some and then they're barely seen anywhere. You want exposure for those. I'm not even sure how effective those signs really are. I think it's more of just an awareness, or like you start seeing them everywhere and you're like, oh, maybe they do have some grassroots support. But yeah, the economy's whack.
Yeah. What's that? Is that some kratom you got going there?
Do you recognize the mug?
I know exactly which mug that is. It's Holla Roast, baby.
Let's go. I wish I could say I was
got mine.
Holla Roast coffee. Here, let me do my zoom. Is it zooming? Let's zoom. Zoom. Little plug there for Nicole.
Hey, thank you.
It's kratom.
Yeah, I figured.
I've actually cut back quite a bit, but I got a pretty busy day today. It's I'm not going to say a stressful day. I've been trying to be more mindful with my language, right? If today's going to be a stressful day, then
it's a tightly scheduled day.
There you go. A very productive day, an intense day in a good way.
That's Mondays for me every week. People are like, can we talk, meet, do something Monday? I'm like, no. You cannot come to my house and fix anything Monday. Like, no.
You may not
very powerful word.
You may not speak to me on a Monday.
I will ignore you on Monday.
Don't take it personal.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with you. I'm just not going to see it. So.
Hey, earlier, Jack, I wasn't calling for revolution or anything.
No, I know you weren't directly, but when you start talking about a small number of people being highly organized, it invokes that, and I think
that's a total fail.
I agree. I mean, I've always said that there's the soapbox, the ballot box, and the ammo box. And in our world today, the ammo box is a death sentence. Like, it's not going to work, and neither do the other ones. we have to like build and carve out our own stuff.
Yep.
And I think that's the only way to go. And if you build and carve out your own stuff sufficiently enough, then maybe you start becoming the magnet that starts attracting. You become the majority.
Yeah.
But I don't even know if it would be good for us to be the majority. If we were large enough to be like, don't fuck with those people. Just leave them alone over there in their freaking places and don't touch them. Like, could we get treated like Gen X by all the other, all the other generations look at Gen X like me and Nicole and they go, fuck those people. They don't even talk about us. We don't even exist. If it wasn't for TikTok, nobody would even know there's a Gen X anymore. Like, that's the only reason we're even known, because creators make jokes about it. Like, whenever you hear demographic studies, they're like, so then there were the boomers and then the millennials and now the Gen. Like, we're not even there. And I kind of like it that way. Like, I'm just
generation.
like that was the whole Gen X philosophy anyway. Fuck you, we don't care, right? Like, if I could get that for a century, our people do our thing outside of their thing, and we can participate when we want to, and they can come over here, and like we're just two separate groups, and we all get along and leave each other mostly alone. I just don't see them being willing to do it. But maybe if there's enough of us, we can be Gen X. Like, fuck you, we don't care.
Yeah. Well, I identify as Generation X, so don't misgeneration me now.
All right. You identify as being born in 75.
Are you a cusper?
No, I was born in '84, so technically I'm a millennial, but I got the
but people in that
millennial
range get defined, like you can kind of choose still based on what you're exposed to.
I kind of made a thing called Zennials.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because you grew up without an internet. Like, at least part of your childhood, you knew no internet, you knew no smartphone.
I got Windows 95 was the very beginning for me.
There you go. Right?
14.4 kbps.
It's not a Commodore, but it's something, right? It's not a 9600 baud modem that you had to have a number to dial and put it in the cradle.
And I skipped over Atari, but I started with Nintendo and Super Nintendo. No Atari, though. Not that.
No Atari. I don't know if I can let you into Gen X without Atari.
Yeah, you gotta have a really good test for this.
I'll get all the references.
CJ's gonna tell us he has a fail-safe way to figure out if you are X or not.
Yeah, I did develop a scientifically valid. So if you question it, you're against science. A scientifically valid way. People born in the first few years of the 80s. I was born in 81, so I was just old enough that I did start with Atari briefly before Nintendo NES took over. But for people born in the first few years of the 80s, here is the ultimate litmus test of whether you're Gen X or millennial. If at any point in your childhood you genuinely, not ironically, not sarcastically, were into Power Rangers and loved Power Rangers, you're a millennial. If you never, if you always thought Power Rangers were lame and stupid and you made fun of people that were really into them, you're Gen X. So, and by that matrix, coincidentally, I'm Gen X.
So I can see it. I can see.
John's like, I don't agree.
I can see his crush for the Pink Ranger coming through. Right?
If that's the only reason that you were into Power Rangers, I'll give you a pass.
Okay. I'm going to give him a pass.
My exposure was my younger brother. My younger brother was 5 years younger, and he was into it. Now, I'm not going to say I didn't watch it with him, but I was mostly hanging out with him.
So Atari released a retro game system of the 2600. It will play the old, like you can go to eBay and buy old games for the 2600 and it will work. And they've got new cartridges that have like 10 games on them. John, if you will go buy one of those and teach your children the magic of Atari gaming systems, we will officially allow you into Gen X. Without that, since you did not use Atari as a kid, I'm sorry, you're out. And then you failed CJ's test too. Or Oregon Trail. Please play Oregon Trail, John.
I played Oregon Trail all day. The big floppy discs.
He's got to get an honorary, like.
Yeah, and that is like
I had the laser
big
disc.
Floppy discs and the.
I had laser disc wheeled into the classroom with the big TV.
See, laser discs. What did we have, guys?
No, the projector.
Right.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it would break, and you're like, no.
And they tape it back together.
My favorite is the projector
together and get it going, man.
I love the projector where the picture was still and it had audio and it would just like switch the still picture every couple of minutes. And it would be like, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. But instead of it actually being animated and moving, it would just be.
That's
And then the narrator would be like,
literally
"Oh
some
no," said
transitional
Mrs.
technology
Frisbee.
that I missed. I never had. I don't know what that is. That's got to be a transitional tech, like
It
laser.
probably is. Okay, we got a question. How many people of the newer generations have you met that got interested in homesteading because of a game or media like Farmville, Little House on the Prairie?
None that ever told me.
Yeah.
The only thing I know about those games is that there was a thing on Big Bang Theory where somebody threw a sheep at Penny and it made Leonard jealous. That's it. I don't know nothing else.
Yeah, I feel like Farmville was a Facebook game.
Is it? That's what I'm thinking.
Because I remember people posting about it and me going, I don't have time for Facebook anyway, so I don't need to add a game to that. And I have an actual farm, and I got to go do stuff on the farm.
Yeah, there's no pause button when animals need feed or care or water, or like not being killed. Like you have to actually do the things. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, was there a point to that question? Like, does that person have you experienced it? Because if you have, that's interesting. Has anybody here experienced that? No.
Nope.
Okay. So we've got 4 no's for most dog.
Yeah.
My pop culture references are all 20 years old or older.
Yep. Well, John, let's talk about exiting and building, which is a very simple way to describe a possible solution to the rat race we've been talking about today.
The solution. So exit and build, exit the systems you disagree with, build new ones, do it with other freedom lovers, have fun while you're doing it. It has to do with all sorts of different areas of our life, from technology to raising our families to health to how we trade amongst ourselves, hiring one another. And but a key piece of it is your geographic location. And as we know, whether it's technocracy in smart cities or corrupt nanny state hard left Democrat run cities, or disruption and civil unrest after elections, or after some, what was that guy's name? The black guy that got choked out. I already forgot.
George Floyd.
George Floyd, after all that chaos, which coincided with the election, I believe, shortly after. Or maybe when was that? That was during the 2020 election.
Yeah. I think you're going further back. You're talking about the dude in New York that was selling the cigarettes?
The cigarette guy?
Oh, that guy, too. That's even worse, too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the city's not the place you want to be if you care about freedom and stability. That's not to say the city doesn't have all sorts of great stuff and arts and culture to offer, and concerts and music and steakhouses. But a huge piece of it is getting out into the country, and not only getting out of the country and then being isolated, but building really tight-knit connections with your neighbors, or buying land collectively with a group of people. And there's all sorts of different legal structures. We actually started a church recently that operates entirely within the private realm. We just got a bank account too, which was really cool, to open up a bank account without having any LLC or Texas nonprofit, or when they asked for a certificate of formation, which is what you get when you file with the Department of or the Secretary of State in most states. It's like nice and stamped. I said, we're an unincorporated church. We don't have a certificate of formation. And they're like, okay. So they were a little bit confused by it all, but ultimately we opened up a bank account. But there's all sorts of different ways that you can hold title to land, that you can create agreements amongst a community. And back to what we were saying about just being left alone, we definitely increase the likelihood of being left alone if we're out of the city. And also on that note, speculating if they'll leave us alone. Everyone's familiar with here. I'm going to pull it up on my thing here. I don't know if you want to full screen it real quick there, Nicole. There's this classic article. Everyone's heard it. Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better.
No privacy. Yeah.
Now, this was published by the World Economic Forum. It's some member of parliament in Sweden, which is so far advanced, or Denmark, I should say. It was November 12th, 2016. So it was before the Great Reset was even like a marketing campaign. But of course, this has been in the works for a while. Anyway, member of parliament in Denmark, which already has digital ID, I should say. Derek Bros just did a talk out there. You go through the article and it talks about, we no longer own cars. And of course, Elon Musk is really pushing for that. We don't really work. In fact, we don't even own our living space. We just, when we're not using it, we let someone else use it. And it comes down here to the bottom, the death of shopping. Why do we need to shop? Why do we know things? But then it goes over here. They live different kinds of lives outside of the city. My biggest concern is all the people who do not live in our city, those we lost along the way, those who decided it became too much, all this technology, those who felt obsolete and useless when robots and AI took over big parts of our jobs. It's all happening now. Those who got upset with the political system and turned against it. They live different kind of lives outside the city. Some have formed little self-supplying communities. Others just stayed in the empty and abandoned houses in small 19th century villages. And then she goes on to say, once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact I have no real privacy. Anyway, we can only hope that that what they outline here, you know, we have little self-supplying communities outside the city that they'll leave us alone. Of course, you know, we're activists at heart, so we're not just looking to preserve ourselves, but we're looking to help humanity. So I worry, as Jack was saying, if we build these incredible communities, which many people already are, and we like put out a beacon like, hey, everybody, there's a different way to live. You don't have to be part of their beast system now that's tracking your every move. You can come out here and join us. I think that may be a bigger threat than us just kind of quietly disappearing into the rural parts of the country. But we know that they have anticipated this movement and they're trying to, you know, COVID was kind of a catch-22 for them because they wanted to herd everyone into the cities. That's Agenda 21. They want to track and control and surveil, and everyone goes to work from their computer. But COVID also encouraged a lot of people to get out of the city and buy land and out in the country. So that's a huge piece of the exit and build thing. I highly encourage folks, if you haven't already, to start considering at least having a piece of land out in the country. You and your friends maybe park some RVs. You got a nice storage shed or a shipping container with some supplies. And if crap never hits the fan, just like Jack says, you know, if things get bad or even if they don't, you can go out and camping with your buddies, or you got a little hunting spot or just a place to get out and hang out around a campfire and drink some beer every once in a while. Take the kids, you know.
Yeah, make it a vacation property if you're not going to live there, I think. I do think getting out is going to get harder. And the reason I say that is because it has. So right when the whole COVID thing popped off, I was like, you know, I said get out of the stock market when I started this show. And it turned out to be a good Paul Revere warning, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then when all this started coming together, I'm like, oh, shit's fixing to go to hell on prices of property. And people are going to start competing for these ideal locations where you can still kind of get into modern conveniences if you want them, but you're far enough away to be left alone. Those little carve-out places are going to become harder and harder to get. And, you know, we're going to have a ton of inflation. So what happens when you have inflation? Prices go up and interest rates go up. And so tell me it's not harder to get your hands on, you know, a nice little place with 4 or 5 acres right now than it was in 2020. Tell me that's not the case. And tell me it's not only not just harder, but it's like way harder, and up to the point of many people who could have done it economically anyway right now, unless they change something, it is completely out of their reach. So it went from doable to I don't know if I'll ever own a house in 4 years. I did not hear millennials saying I will never own a home in 2019. I did not hear that. One, you know, the ones that did, you're like, yeah, fuck off. You probably wouldn't anyway. But now it's the average millennial is telling you that. And the Gen Zs have, like, they're not even thinking about it. Like, I guess I'm going to be a renter for the rest of my life.
Everybody I know at a normal income level who had a JOB, who is able to acquire a house right now, is doing it in an unusual way. They're doing something like finding land somewhere, buying it, living in a camper, living in a tent while they put together something out like way. And a lot of the land they're buying is not the ideal homesteading land. It's just, I can get this here. There's a community here, and I'm going to do what I have to do to make this happen. And I'm talking people with, you know, $80,000 a year incomes, which didn't used to sound like not enough. But when you're looking at a house that's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath for $750,000 to $1 million, they're not wrong. It's hard to come up with that down payment and finance that. And then your property taxes on that, which are super evil, are also huge. Like my mortgage payment is their property tax payment on their property.
Yeah, right now my property tax is more than my mortgage.
Wow.
Now my mortgage is very, very, very fucking low for the property I have because of when I bought, what I paid for it, how much we've knocked it down. But yeah, my housing expense is higher on the property tax side than it is on the mortgage side.
But it's still a choice you can make.
Yeah.
It's just the sacrifices you get to make that choice happen have gone up.
Yeah.
They've gone up unless you have a different way to get wealth.
And to your point about unconventional ways of doing things, like the people that bought the property finally next to me that was really a mess and they've cleaned it up and that's great. It was a 6-acre piece and they broke off 4 of the 6 acres and sold it.
Nice.
And that's how they were able to build a house, which is a very modest house. They had to sell 4 acres of land to build basically a small barndominium for their father-in-law. That's what they've done with it. And now they're putting in, like, they put in 5, it looks like 5 pads they're putting in to rent to RVers. Because where we live, you can do that. But they've already made, like, they have a sign up advertising it's coming, and it's like 55 and older only. Because 55-year-olds don't have parties and cause shit and cause problems. That's why. So they're augmenting their development of that property by putting more people on that property than have ever been there.
Yeah. We have 3 RV pads on our property, and it definitely helps with the homesteading. That's for damn sure. We wouldn't be able to.
Do you have permanent people, or do they kind of come and go like an Airbnb thing? Or
2 permanent people. We have 2. We have 3 spots. One of them, they were only there for a couple months. They were supposed to be there for longer, but the other 2 folks are permanent. One of them's a family. They got 2 little kiddos, and they're about to have a third. So it's worked out really well, and we have ambitions to add another few spots. Yeah, and we got in right there with the 3% interest rate. So
yeah, you did.
Definitely
holding the wire, bro. I saw
that. Yeah, it was 2021. But as far as the exit and build thing, one highly valuable, unconventional thing, just as we've had people come onto our property, the rent is reasonably affordable, but there's been situations. Well, in fact, the gentleman that lives there with us, he's like really putting in tons of sweat equity. Like, we just dug out this massive pond. It was the scope of the project far exceeded what our vision was, but he just went to town. He's all permacultured out, and it's now like flowing in. We got a food forest that we're building there as well, with berms and swales. But he is basically just putting in that sweat equity, and his rent is a wash every month. Now, mind you, he's putting in way over the value of what the rent would be. But for people that, can get their hands dirty and build, or just be a good community member, you may find situations where you can get, instead of having to come up with $50,000 to $100,000 for a down payment, you can get yourself an RV and then just go provide a ton of value for an existing homestead. There's, if there's a will, there's a way. And the first thing we need to do is get out of our own way. Oh, I can't afford it. I can't. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So if you just align yourself to it and believe that you can make it happen, whether you're buying your own place, coming up with the money, or you're figuring some creative situation to add value to somebody's existing homestead, I'm sure Jack will take you in. Oftentimes you'll find that, you just keep pushing and you're able to make it happen.
Man, when SHTF happens, man, I'm going to Jack's. No, I'm staying here. You are muted, Jack.
Beep, beep.
I would strongly advise against that plan or decision. That would probably be a bad choice. But I do, as John was talking there, I do wonder is there a model? Like, do we need to we make fun of the generational divides and all, but what Gen X has? We still have the ability to do shit. We're not in our complete twilight years yet. We have money. And of all the generations out there right now, we're even ahead of the boomers with these. We have the best work-life balance of any generation. That's a known. Because we came up at a time when we could make money and we could develop skills and we could move relatively fast with career progression. So I'm not saying every Gen Xer is doing great. I'm just saying as a generation, we're doing fairly well. And is there opportunity more like what John's talking about there, where we can acquire a property and we can become that property? Because what a Gen Z has, even if they're dumb as shit right now, the ability to learn and a strong back and a willingness to do things when you're that age that maybe you're not willing to do when you're in your 50s. And what I mean by that is this idea about get an RV and go live on somebody's property, bring a ton of value and develop yourself from there, and then use the money you're saving to pack away capital so that you can have your own thing one day. Like, when I was 25, if you gave me that opportunity, you would have to blow me out of it with a stick of dynamite. You think I'm doing that now? I'm not doing that. I'm not living in an RV. I'm not going into a nomad lifestyle. And I think less people in their 50s are willing to do that than people in their 20s. But maybe there's a partnership that's naturally waiting to happen there. And the other thing is, our generation did grow up learning how to do shit. Like when I was talking about taping the video film back together, because if you didn't figure out the teacher taught you, or you didn't get a day off in class, like that was our mindset. Like we'll do anything to avoid what we don't want, no matter how much work it takes to get it done. And so we figured out all kinds of shit. That means we have a lot to teach, right? I started doing these videos for a while. I should have kept doing them. It was all the kind of things that like I took for granted that everybody knew, that not everybody knows, because nobody, and it's not wrong that you don't know because nobody taught you. So like one is like, do you know that if you get a standard pair of everyday pliers, that they're also wire cutters? Did everyone hear? Look, John's like, what? Okay, because nobody told
I knew that.
Come on. You did know that.
I know that from listening to your podcast.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Right, but the back of a pair of regular slip joint pliers is a wire cutter. Like, and I just wonder how many things are like that, dude. Like, you mock young people, but how the fuck would they know? Who told them? Like, a lot of them grew up no father in the household. Like, 80% of their teachers are female. So why would a young man who's 19-year-old right now, who barely has ever even seen a toolbox, know that? And what right do we have to expect that they would? And how many things are they like that if the opportunity to learn was there, they would take it. They would embrace it. I make jokes and all, but I do not see people that are 25 right now as lesser people than we are in any way, shape, or form. I just think there's certain things they know that we don't, and things we know that they don't, and maybe there is a opportunity there, a really big one. And we might want to make friends with them before we're in the nursing home.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting as I'm looking at the comments here, you know, somebody's saying, hey, I'm in my 40s living in a tractor. I think it was Aaron Sweet. And RV life is fine, but I can't do it forever. So in your 40s doing that, you end up creating a space that you can rent.
Yeah.
And leverage that into a different living situation. I'm doing a presentation at Jack's about designing your homestead for old age, and part of that is who is going to take over the homestead after me. Yeah. If I have kids, will they? If I don't have kids, who will take it over? Because it's a great resource for people who want to exit the system. Now, I understand that we are getting tight on time for some geese here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So do we want to say anything before we do once around the horn? Let's do that. Like, let's wrap up this topic, and then we'll go once around the horn.
I'll just say, no matter who wins, we're fucked. So make sure you have a plan.
No, we forgot to do the thing where we predict what happens based on who wins, but I don't think we need to do that.
Do we want to do a prediction on who wins? Just that?
We did that in 2020. Boy, were we wrong.
We were wrong. I'll go on a limb. Orange Man wins. Republicans keep the House and increase their lead and take over the Senate by about 2 seats.
Wow.
The uniparty that's trouble for freedom people when one party controls the whole shebang.
Didn't say what I wanted to happen, said what I think is going to happen.
I think Trump has more support. That's what we were saying in 2020. It was pretty clear. I mean, he just packed like 75,000 apparently at the Nazi rally that they're all calling. How ridiculous is that? But I don't know. I feel like this whole deep state DNC deal, they're so desperate to keep him out of office that there's some other trick that they'll play, but they gotta bear in mind what that would result in. Another January 6th kind of deal, which was a psyop in its own right. But maybe they're also playing that maybe the division plays into their hand, because then they could see, we told you these guys were crazy. These guys are going to tear everything down. So I think Trump is going to be the rightful winner. I don't know that they'll be able to pull off another steal. There goes the YouTube feed. But ultimately, for our own life, I just want to reiterate, let's make moves. And I know it's easier said than done, of course, but let's try to become so independent, so productive, so well connected within our communities that the political system is less relevant every year that goes by.
CJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as things stand right now, barring some kind of crazy, unforeseen November surprise or Black Swan or whatever, like World War III really starting, I think Trump is, the favorite to win this time, especially when you look at his predicted lead in the Electoral College, which is what ultimately matters. But like, I don't see it being, a happy ending or anything like that, that it's just going to then open the door to a whole bunch more chaos and instability and, potential disorder and violence even, especially when you look at the degree to which the hardcore TDS crowd is way more comfortable with things like street violence than the pro-Trump people. Just look at January 6th and like the lack of weapons and violence there. Compare that to any Antifa, BLM event, whatever, that results in chaotic violence. It's like there's a greater potential for just disorganized street violence and stuff with Trump winning than with Harris winning, I believe. Not to say that Trump supporters may not, get angry and demonstrate and maybe even do some stupid, unwise stuff, but I don't know. I think the other side is the side that's more prone to violence and towards being supported by the establishment to the degree the establishment can. If they
like setting 40 cities on fire at the same time.
Jeez.
Yeah, and providing bricks at demonstration sites, and then providing high class George Soros funded lawyers to bail people out for burning down their local Starbucks or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I think no matter what happens as far as who wins the election, there's gonna be a huge percentage of people that don't see it as legitimate no matter which way it goes. And so strap in. I'm kind of looking at it the same way I'm looking at a category 4 or 5 hurricane that's coming in my neighborhood, where it's like, in the short term, there's nothing I can do but batten down the hatches, hunker in the bunker, and we'll do our best to clean up the mess once it passes by.
I think a Trump win furthers the New World Order attempt. And this has not been a popular opinion. I don't think the Democrats have wanted to win this whole time, but they have to make it look good. And if Trump wins and the Democrats lose, and then they can claim the election doesn't look legitimate, that sets the foundation for a much bigger power play coming forward. So I've thought Trump was going to win probably since July. I haven't really changed my mind, but it hasn't been a very popular opinion that I think the Democrats want to lose. I think if I was a Democrat in power, I would want to lose, because also there's a bag of shit that's about to be lit on fire and thrown at all of our doorsteps, and I don't want to be the person who is holding the bag or catching that bag, right? So that's my opinion. Okay, let's go once around the horn. John Bush, what?
Real quick, Nicole. That's the Uncle Ted strategy right there. Like, it's not so much that Trump alone will advance the NWO. It's that Trump's failure, especially if he gets both houses, and then the shitbag lands. See? We told you this guy was crazy. We told you he was economic disaster. We told you all these crazy libertarians being involved were horrible, letting these people, like, this is all because of him. If I were a Democrat right now, I wouldn't want anything to do with the next 4 years and being responsible for it. To get what I want, I would not want it. Anyway, I think you're spot on.
All right. John, what do you got cooking that we should know about?
Oh, yeah. So we did this town hall. People can get instant access to the replay. It's called the Exit and Build Town Hall. As a couple hours long, myself, Derek Bros, and this guy Bradley Logan we've been working with as far as the private realm goes. We just basically laid out the case for not voting. Also understanding people are still going to vote regardless, but we're really just trying to motivate people to take responsibility for their lives by leveraging exit and build strategy. So Derek Bros joined us, Bradley Logan. It was a great thing. People can watch the town hall for free at exitandbuild.com. And it was great to get the geese back together. I'm down to do it again sometime. I think this was cool. And it looks like a lot of folks in the comments were totally digging it and glad to see us back. So always a pleasure, y'all.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for joining us, John. CJ, what do you got going on?
Well, coming up very soon, I'm actually going to be officially publishing the Indiegogo campaign for it later today, or if not tomorrow. I'm going to be teaching a 4-part online course. I'm calling it the Dangerous History Live CM. And the course, this first one that I'm going to teach is going to be on the decline and fall of the Soviet Empire. So you can get a detailed deep dive taught by me on all the stuff you didn't know, all the details they left out or that they, put in a misleading way about what it really meant when the last superpower collapsed and what it was like and the causes and consequences of it. And I'm actually going to be talking to Jack tomorrow for an episode of TSP on this course. I was originally going to sell access to it through Patreon, but I've decided to go with the Indiegogo, crowdfunding model instead. So yeah, Dangerous History Live CM, Decline and Fall of the Soviet Empire, coming very soon.
Cool.
Shoot me the info. I'll throw it in my Monday mail.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Jack.
So I've got CJ on tomorrow, like you said, and regular week ending out. I got one more week next week, and then we're going to be gone for a week because we have TSP 24 going on right here in our backyard. And just want to remind everybody flying in that if you fly into DFW and there's crazy shit going on in Dallas because of the election, you don't have to care. You can come straight over here on the express lane and you'll be fine. And you don't have to go anywhere near downtown Fort Worth or Dallas, though Fort Worth usually is pretty chill. As far as what I got going on otherwise, I'm ready for the end of the year, folks. I really am. This is my time of year where I coast a little bit and I enjoy the holidays. And I would say in spite of all this dark shit, like that's something I really advise people to do every year. I have a tradition that goes all the way back to I came up in the cable and communications industry and as a contractor. And generally they sent us home right before Christmas and we didn't come back to work. We didn't get paid for this. We didn't come back to work till after the New Year. And as I moved into professional life and all and had vacation days, I always took that time off and I shut my business down during that period. And I ain't saying do it that particular time. I'm saying as we head into the holiday season, Christmas, Thanksgiving, etc., carve out some time to just be and just chill the hell out, because as much work as there is to do, what is life if we don't actually live it?
All right, guys, I would love to have a conversation with some of you all about what steps you're taking to have more balance in your life. And John brought that up at the beginning of the episode, and we've been focusing on that here. November 1st, we will be launching at Holler Roast Coffee a new holiday product that's not on the website yet. It's hollerroast.com, but it's called a Holler Roast BB. And I'm just going to foreshadow what it is here. I didn't want to throw it out before Thanksgiving, before Halloween, because in a couple of days, we all got to put on costumes and have some fun, right? And then it's all holiday at Holler Roast. But we do have these Freedom Pods available, which are K-Cups you can take on the road. And then you don't have to have crappy hotel coffee, but you can use their K-Cup maker. And definitely pay attention to what's up with the Holler Roast BB. And if you give me the most creative answer on November 1st, when we launch the first quiz about that, you'll get a Holler Roast BB for free. So that's all over at hollerroast.com. I'm with John. I totally enjoyed this episode. It was great to get together and just trade some thoughts about the world we live in with a bunch of my freedom-oriented friends. So thanks, guys, for coming on. And we will see you after the election.
Unloose the goose. We'll take no views. Your paradigm's run out of time and we've got no